Shabbat shalom, everyone. I was flipping through the TV channels the other night when I stumbled upon a classic, the 1968 original film, The Planet of the Apes, starring Moses himself, Charlton Heston. Now, I had seen this movie before when I was a kid, and I remember back then thinking it was kind of spooky. I thought it was kind of cool. But when I rewatched it this time, I couldn't help but think it was a tad bit cheesy. And I was also confused as to why Charlton Heston, who is regarded as one of the most important and prolific actors of the 20th century, I didn't get why he would sign on to do a movie about anthropomorphic gorillas. But regardless, I stuck around and watched quite a bit of it, and I have to admit, I did have fun watching it. Nowadays, people either love or hate this movie, but I did some research, and apparently when this film came out, it was immediately met with critical acclaim. Many critics called it the best film of 1968, and it made a ton of money at the box office, so much so that there have been many spin-offs. I counted. There are actually 10 Planet of the Apes films. 10! If you count all the reboots and prequels and sequels. But that's not counting the really awful television shows, the books and documentaries and comic books that were all inspired by this one film. Now, if you've never seen this movie, I can summarize the plot pretty easily. Charlton Heston is the leader of a team of astronauts who have awakened from deep sleep hibernation after a light-speed space voyage from Earth, and their spacecraft crashes into a lake on an unknown planet. And they are soon confronted by talking gorillas on horseback who imprison them. This is a movie that came out in 1968 for some reason. While being held hostage, Charlton Heston discovers that this planet is ruled by talking primates, and the apes who govern the planet consider humans to be primitive vermin, and they are to be hunted and either killed outright, enslaved, or used in scientific experience. Now, when I say this movie is cheesy, maybe I'm being a little too harsh. I guess in 1968, the film maybe looked a little sharper, but to the modern day viewer, the ape makeup just looks like a bad Halloween mask. The dialogue is pretty corny, and it's being uttered by Charlton Heston. At one point, while the astronauts are walking through the desert, there's supposed to be a thunderstorm, but they couldn't afford that technology. So instead of filming in the rain, they just painted the sky dark to mimic lightning, and it looks ridiculous. Much of the plot of the film is dedicated to Heston's character trying to convince the apes that he is in fact an intellectual, capable of speaking and communicating, but this sentiment is automatically shut down by his would-be ape supervisors. The only character to show Heston any compassion or empathy is an ape named Sara, who is an ape scientist that believes he is capable of intellect and wisdom, and she shows him kindness and love when all the other apes won't give him the time of the day. Now, even though this movie is pretty cheesy, I think the premise of the film is somewhat relatable to everyone, and perhaps that is the reason why this movie was so incredibly successful. I think everyone has probably felt like an outcast at some point, or felt as if society was populated by a class of people that don't understand them. I bet we all have similar stories from our own experiences where we all wanted to, or all we wanted to be was to be accepted and be seen as equals by our peers and colleagues, only to be disregarded, or discarded. Heston's character's experience in exploring this foreign new land is not too dissimilar from the character of Eliezer from our Parsha for the week, Parshat Chayei Sara. Now, ironically, the words Chayei Sara literally translate to the life of Sarah, but the Parsha starts off with her dying. We're told at the beginning of the story that she dies, and Abraham has to acquire a place to bury her, which he does. But afterwards, after she's buried in this cave at Machpelah, the story shifts to a very different mission, where Abraham asks his servant Eliezer to travel back to the place of his birth to acquire a wife for his son Isaac. Now Eliezer agrees, and he makes the long journey to the city of Nahor, which was located in ancient Mesopotamia, which is now modern-day Turkey, so quite a long schlep. When he finally arrives in the new city, he's completely out of his element. All around him are strangers, and now he is the outsider. He's seen as an alien or a foreigner, or possibly even a threat. So Eliezer eventually goes to the local well to procure water for his camels, and in his discomfort he prays to God to deliver the woman that will be Isaac's wife. And sure enough, moments after he prays this, a beautiful maiden named Rebecca, arrives at the well, and like Zerah, that ape scientist, Rebecca is the only person who shows him compassion. Rebecca not only gives the thirsty Eliezer water from the well, but she also waters all of his camels. And she tells him that he can stay at her father's house for the night. This act of kindness signifies that Rebecca is in fact the perfect wife for Isaac, and she returns back home with Eliezer, and the Torah tells us that she is a comfort to Isaac after the death of his mother. My friends, perhaps it's the rabbi in me, but I can't help but notice that in these two stories, Charlton Heston in his alien ape world, Eliezer in a foreign land, I can't help but notice that these two stories both contain men that are desperate for the same thing: to be seen, to be recognized as human, to have someone look at them and say, I know who you are. I see your dignity. For Heston, every ape that he encounters mocks him, cages him, studies him, but no one listens and no one cares. No one can imagine that he might be worth more than the category that they've assigned him, except for Zerah, who in the midst of a society that denies human worth looks at him and sees something different. She sees his fear, his desperation, his intelligence, but most importantly, his soul. And Eliezer experiences almost the same exact arc, except luckily with the exact opposite ending. He walks into a new land as a stranger, nervous, tired, and vulnerable, with every eye around him seeing him as foreign, unknown, perhaps even suspicious, except for our matriarch, Rebecca. Rivka looks at him, not at his clothing, not at his foreign accent, not at the fact that he's all alone and out of place, but rather she looks at his humanity. She sees a man who is thirsty. She sees a traveler who needs shelter. She sees a heart that is carrying someone else's hopes. Where others see difference, Rebecca sees dignity. Where others might have walked past, she stops. Where others might have judged, she offers water. And that, my friends, changes everything. Zerah and Rivka both do the exact thing, even though they live in opposite genres across opposite universes. They choose to see the humanity in someone the world has decided not to see. And my friends, while I know that these are just characters from stories, if there's anything our world needs today, I think it's more Zerahs and Rebekahs. Because the truth is, every single one of us meets people who, for one reason or another, society has a hard time fully seeing. Whether it's the coworker who everyone finds annoying, or the family member who always rubs you the wrong way, the neighbor who the neighbor who keeps to themselves, or the person at shul who sits alone at Kiddush, or perhaps the stranger who looks different or speaks differently or behaves or believes differently than we do. We all know these people. So the question becomes, how do we respond to them? Do we respond like apes, by categorizing them or dismissing them, assuming the worst? Or do we respond like Rivka, by seeing the human being standing right in front of us? Because what Rivka teaches us in our Parsha, and what Zerah shows us in science fiction, is that one moment of being truly seen can alter the course of someone's life. Even if it's just a cup of water, even if it's just a moment of kindness, even if it's just a willingness to listen for a brief moment. Any act of compassion offered to someone who feels small or invisible or misunderstood is huge. These are not small things. These are life-changing things. The Torah says covenant-building things, world-repairing things. So this week, I want to invite all of us to take on one simple practice. I want you to find one person who feels like an outsider and make them feel like an insider. Find one person who feels ignored and make them feel noticed, even but for just a moment. Find one person who feels like a stranger and make them feel human. That is the legacy of Rivka. And that is the sacred work that we as Jews are called to do every single day. So my friends, may we all have the eyes to see and the hearts to act, and the courage to lift up humanity in every person we meet. And if we can do that, then our community, the only time anyone ever says, "damn dirty ape," will be when they're quoting a movie and not talking about their neighbor. Shabbat Shalom.